Annie was born in very humble beginnings in New York in 1853, and around 1860 the father moved the family to California so he could work in the mines and support his family. It was about that time that Annie and her two sisters started performing. Later on, Annie's father was killed. It was believed to be in a mining accident, and Annie's mother did remarry a fellow named Annie Pixley, and that's where the family took over the name of Pixley, and the girls were forever known as the Pixley sisters from then on. In that time period, any kind of entertainment was basically self-made. So you can picture the family gathering around the piano and singing songs and in that type of thing. So I think while they were in California at the mining camps, that would have been part of maybe a gathering at the end of a hard week. Everybody would get together and maybe somebody would pull out a harmonica and somebody would start singing. So I think the girls singing together and doing little dances was something that was very natural to them. However, I think they were very talented and probably had a natural flair for the dramatic, and that's why it seemed so special, their performances together. I'm not sure how the transition with Annie and her sisters performing for fun or just for family entertainment changed into a business or being booked into venues and actually getting paid for their performances. But I think it's something that happened quite naturally. They went from just being together, having fun and singing, and I think the right people must have seen them and kind of pushed them into that different venues that actually started getting paid for, and they realized this could be something they could make a career out of. In just a few short years, a lot of things changed for them, and they became more professional, and I think that probably put a lot of pressure on all of them. And that could be why that at a certain point, Annie's one sister, Minnie, decided to marry and retire from show business. The younger sister, Lucy, decided to pursue her career on the East Coast, which she did quite well. And that's when Annie kind of went out on her own. She met her husband, Robert Fulford, who was a fellow actor from Britain. And they married, and he became her manager, and that's when her career really took off. She rose to the top internationally. She was quite famous all across the States, England, Australia. Reviews everywhere were always very positive of Annie, so she was quite well known. Even here in Canada, there was a lot of reviews written about Annie, and she was just one of those names that everybody knew. Though Annie was very well known for her comedic abilities, she was also quite the songstress. Many reviews spoke highly of the quality of her voice and the skills that she had, the range that she had. So I think she was a very wide-range actress. She was able to do dramatic parts, sing parts, dance, and also have the comedic timing, which was probably at that time very rare, especially for women. Annie had done a variety of plays and theater, but I think the role that made her famous was Melisse, Child of the Sierras. That's kind of where she hit her mark. From then she was well known for a number of different performances, but one of the ones that really stand out was when she portrayed Josephine in Gilbert and Sullivan's HMS Pinafore. She became very famous for that role. She did perform here in Canada, in London, at the original Grand Theatre. She did a couple of performances there. There was a lot of notoriety surrounding Annie, and whenever she was in town or in residence, people were always aware of that and would just flock to see her. I think when you're thinking about the time period that Annie was famous in, it was a very small world for women to be involved in the theater. So she was right up there at the top with a few other well-known actresses and singers as well, but very small field, and I think her presence there was quite significant for the time. I think it was a very positive relationship with both Annie and Robert being involved in show business. I think that gave Annie the support and the understanding of what she would be dealing with. Robert knew that well himself from being a former actor. As her manager, he was able to protect her and promote her in the way that she would have liked. So he had her best interests at heart, especially being her husband. But I think the two of them together made it a team and gave her the extra support and energy probably that she needed to keep going sometimes. It was probably a very busy schedule, traveling around night after night in theaters. So I think the two of them together made a great team. In 1874, Annie and Robert welcomed their first and only child, a son they named Tommy Rowland Fulford. I don't think Annie took much time off work after having Tommy, but Robert's family was living in Port Stanley, close to London here, and during a lot of the performances of the time on the road that they were traveling, Tommy would stay with his paternal grandparents. Robert's sister, Emma, was married to William Fraser, and William and Emma ran the Fraser House Hotel in Port Stanley. And it was quite a well-to-do getaway for people, and it became known that Annie and Robert would stay there during the summer months vacationing, and that attracted a lot of people to the area. And it was during those times that Annie became familiar with London. They would take the train back and forth between Port Stanley and London, and she became very socially known in the circles here in London, and that's what actually led to her performing at the Grand Theatre here in town a couple of times. But they vacationed and stayed in Port Stanley during the summer months, the three of them. And then during Annie's performances, Tommy would stay there with the in-laws with his parents and with his aunt and uncle at the Fraser House Hotel and his cousins while Annie and Robert toured. I find that Canada is just now starting to catch up with the fact that exploring our past and the history of the people that have lived here and the things that they have done is something that's very significant and important. I think it's time that we really do start pursuing and promoting the history and the people that lived here in this country and made it what it is. There's some extremely important stories and people that just need to be brought to light. And I think the time has come that we start to explore more of these stories and tell them and share them with the world.